Preferred shares ETFs are an odd asset class because they're not entirely bonds or equities, but they share similarities with both of them. And in this video, I'm gonna go over my 5 top picks for the best preferred shares ETFs in Canada. Hey, what's going on? It's Chris here from Wealth Awesome. Preferred shares ETFs are considered as fixed income investments, but they're also susceptible to equity market risk that might worry some investors. There is a massive landscape of Canadian ETFs you can consider, and I'll focus on the best preferred shares ETFs in Canada in this video. ETFs in Canada can help you better understand the asset class and whether you should consider adding it to your investment strategy. Let's start by what is a preferred shares ETF. These are exchange traded funds that encapsulate collections of preferred shares. These stocks are a special type of stock that pays dividends but does not come with voting rights. Preferred shares are essentially hybrid securities that pay dividends like equities. Canadian preferred shares are also eligible for dividend tax credit, and investors can trade preferred shares ETFs on the stock market. These ETFs are not as volatile as equities, though. Still, they are subject to the movement of the market. Investors who select preferred shares ETFs often consider the asset class as a fixed income asset. However, the fourth quarter for 2018, for example, saw the S&P TSX preferred shares total return index lose 10%. And this was proof that preferred shares ETFs are subject to a lot of equity market risks as well. Preferred shares are also similar to bonds because they are sensitive to interest rates and have several classes or types. It means when a company issues a class of preferred shares, they can have an end date, a fixed or floating distribution rate, and other features similar to bonds. Essentially, preferred shares are an asset class between stocks and bonds. You could use them to tweak a portfolio to replace some of the equity or corporate bond portion of it potentially. However, I would not recommend using them to substitute equities because preferred shares don't participate in the upside as much. A major no-go if you're an investor with a long-term investing horizon. I may have my reservations about investing in preferred shares. However, here are the list of what I think are the top ones that are currently trading on the TSX. Number 1 is the BMO Laddered Preferred Share Index ETF. The index that this ETF is designed to mirror includes Canadian preferred shares that meet the listing, liquidity, size, and quality criteria. And this ETF is designed for investors looking to boost the passive income in their portfolios. The index uses a 5-year laddered structure where annual buckets are equally weighted, while the securities within each bucket are market cap weighted. The BMO Ladder Preferred Shared Index ETF has several benefits that make it one of the best preferred shares ETFs in Canada. It is invested in a diversified portfolio of rate reset preferred shares. The lower interest rate sensitivity compared to the full preferred shares market gives it more stability. Additionally, it is professionally managed by BMO Global Asset Management, an advantage over many other of its peers, and it's a recognizable name for many Canadians. Number 2 is Horizon's Active Preferred Share ETF. This ETF has the investment objective of providing its investors with dividend income while preserving its capital. It aims to achieve that goal by investing primarily in preferred shares of Canadian companies. It is an exchange-traded fund incorporated in Canada. Horizon's Active Preferred Shared ETF may also invest in preferred shares of companies located in the US, the fixed income securities of Canada, and US-based issuers, including other income-generating assets. It may also invest in Canadian equity securities and ETFs that issue index participating units. The ETF seeks, to the extent possible, to hedge its non-Canadian dollar currency exposure to the Canadian dollar at all times. It is an actively managed ETF that doesn't seek to replicate the performance of any underlying reference benchmark and is designed to track the performance of the Canadian preferred shared market. The ETF's portfolio composition can drastically vary materially from that of the index in both constituent issuers and weightings. Number 3 is the iShares S&P TSX Canadian Preferred Share ETF. This ETF seeks to replicate, to the extent possible, the performance of the S&P TSX Preferred Share Index, net of expenses. The underlying index consists of preferred stocks listed and traded in Canadian dollars on the TSX. The preferred shares issued by a company have to meet its financing or capital requirements, including fixed rate and floating preferred shares, cumulative and non-cumulative preferred shares, and preferred shares with a callable or conversion feature. The preferred shares must have a market capitalization of more than $100 million as of the monthly rebalancing reference date over the last 10 trading days to be eligible for the index. This ETF is the oldest ETF in the category, and its track record indicates the up and downs of this asset class. Investors can use this ETF to gain exposure to a diversified portfolio of Canadian preferred shares. They can also use it to diversify sources of income beyond GICs and government bonds. Number 4 is Invesco Canadian Preferred Share Index ETF. This is an ETF incorporated in Canada, and this ETF seeks to replicate to the extent possible the performance of the NASDAQ Select Canadian Preferred Share Index before fees and expenses. This ETF primarily invests in preferred shares issued in Canada. The ETF is a variation of the indexing theme, and it is one of the 6 ETFs that invest primarily in Canadian preferred shares with at least a 3-year history. This ETF is the only one among them offering an above average Morningstar rating for risk-adjusted historical returns. It is a combination of the 100 highest yielding and lowest volatile dividend-paying preferred stocks in the stock market. The underlying NASDAQ Select Canadian Preferred Share Index is a modified market cap weighted index, mainly consisting of financial institutions, preferred shares, and energy stock preferred shares. It historically demonstrated a low correlation to investments in common equity and investment grade fixed income securities. Number 5 is RBC Canadian Preferred Share ETF. The RBC Canadian Preferred Share ETF aims to provide investors with exposure to the performance of a diversified portfolio of primarily Canadian preferred stocks. Ideally, its portfolio includes Canadian preferred shares that will provide investors with regular income with long-term capital growth potential. This ETF primarily invests in an actively managed portfolio of rate reset preferred shares issued by Canadian companies trading on the TSX. The ETF selects the preferred shares in its portfolio based on fundamental analysis, credit research, and interest rate sensitivity analysis. This ETF may also hold preferred shares issued by Canadian companies that are not reset preferred shares, fixed income securities issued by Canadian companies or governments, dividend-paying common stocks from Canadian issuers, and preferred shares from US issuers, as well as other Canadian ETFs. It can work well in the portfolio of investors who want to diversify their portfolio with preferred shares, require regular income, and can accept fluctuations in the value of their investments. So how to buy preferred shares ETFs in Canada? So there's several ways you can invest in preferred shares. I think the best way overall just to buy ETFs is using Wealthsimple Trade at this moment, because they offer free ETF buys and sells if they're Canadian ones. There's no cheaper option to buy than this in Canada, and you can get a $50 sign-up bonus in the link below. So if you're interested in preferred stocks, you can consider the best preferred share ETFs in Canada. Choosing a preferred shares ETF means you don't have to worry about researching and maintaining various preferred stocks by yourself. The ETFs manage it all for you based on their specific goals, and that's the beauty of ETFs. They also offer tax-efficient dividends and relatively low volatility during stable interest rate environments. Personally, I would prefer using ETFs over picking individual preferred shares if I was considering investing in preferred shares, and I would go with the top few picks in this list. But overall, I think preferred shares, I'm not a huge fan of them. I think it's better just to buy either fixed income or equities. If you insist, take a look at the list, and I hope you like something in it. All right, since you made it this far, like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting out content on a regular basis. Also be sure to check out the blog, wealthawesome.com. It goes into this topic in way more detail, and there's a written version of it in the link below. And as always, thanks for listening.